Dr. Kim Hannah rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the glowing screens around her. The small monitoring station floated quietly in space, far from Earth, collecting signals from distant stars. She had been working the night shift for 3 years now, and most nights were boring. Static, random noise, and the occasional broken signal from old human satellites. But tonight was different. The quantum detector was making sounds she had never heard before. It wasn't the usual beeping or humming. This was almost like screaming. The machine was picking up something so strong, so intense, that it made her headset vibrate against her ears. "Jay, come look at this," she called to her partner across the small room. Lee Jay was eating instant noodles at his desk, half asleep. The monitoring station only had 2 people working at night, and they usually spent their time drinking coffee and playing cards. But when he heard the panic in Hannah's voice, he quickly put down his food and walked over. "What is it? Another broken satellite?" he asked, looking at her screens.
Oh.
"This is coming from deep space." "Really deep space?" Hannah pointed at the readings. "Look at these patterns. This isn't random noise, Jay. There's something here. Something organized." Jay leaned closer, his eyes widening as he saw the data flowing across the screen. The signal was complex, layered, almost like music, but not quite. There were mathematical sequences mixed with something else, something that felt emotional. "It's like someone is trying to tell us something," Hannah whispered, but not with words. With feelings. She started typing quickly, running the signal. Through their translation programs, the computer tried to make sense of the patterns, looking for familiar structures. Hours passed as they worked together, drinking cup after cup of coffee, their eyes glued to the screens. Slowly, a picture began to form. The signal was coming from a star system, 18 light-years away. Humans had detected it before and given it a simple name, the Zephyrian system. It had planets, but no one had ever paid much attention to it. It was too far away, and the planets seemed ordinary. But now something was happening there. Something terrible. "Oh my God," Hannah breathed. As the translation program finally started working, "Jay, I think there are people there. Living beings, and they're in trouble." The signal wasn't just random noise. It was a message. A cry for help sent across the galaxy using quantum technology that human scientists barely understood. The beings who sent it were trying to tell anyone. Who would listen that their world was dying, their sun was collapsing? Hannah felt sick as she read the translated message. The star in the Zephyrian system was turning into something called a neutron star. When that happened, everything in the system would be destroyed. The planets, the moons, and anyone living there. According to the signal, there were 40 million. Of them, they're asking for help, Jay said quietly, reading over her shoulder. They're begging someone, anyone, to save them. Hannah stared at the screen, her hands shaking. The beings calling themselves Zephyrians had been sending this message for months, maybe years. It was getting stronger and more desperate as their sun got closer to collapse. But who else was listening? She began checking other frequencies, looking for responses to the Zephyrian signal. What she found made her heart sink. There were other civilizations out there, much more advanced than humans. Their technology was so sophisticated that they could probably help the Zephyrians easily, but they weren't responding. "Look at this," she showed Jay the data. "Acta Council detected this signal 6 months ago.
Acta Baba.
The hegemony picked it up. 2, and the collective. All the big civilizations know about this. So why aren't they helping?" Hannah pulled up more information about these advanced species. They had rules, procedures, committees that decided who was worth saving. They looked at things like cost, benefit, strategic value. Zephyrians were too far away, too primitive, too expensive to save. It wasn't profitable. They've written them off, Hannah said, her voice full of anger. 40 million people are going to die, and these advanced civilizations have decided it's not worth the effort. The Zephyrian signal continued to play through their speakers, and now that Hannah knew what it was, she could hear the desperation in it. It wasn't just mathematics and data. It was the sound of an entire species facing extinction, crying out to the galaxy for someone, anyone, to care. But the galaxy had already moved on to more important things, except for Earth, their small, primitive Monitoring station with its old equipment and tired scientists was still listening, still caring. The humans didn't have advanced technology or great wisdom. They were barely able to travel between planets in their own solar system, but they had something the advanced civilizations seemed to have lost. They had hearts. "We have to tell Earth," Hannah said, her fingers already moving to send the signal home. "We have to let them know what's happening." As she sent the data toward Earth, she wondered what her species would do. Humans were young, weak, and poor compared to the great galactic civilizations. They had never attempted anything like interstellar rescue. But maybe, just maybe, it would be foolish enough to try. The Great Hall of the United Nations had never seen anything like this. For 14 straight hours, delegates from every country on Earth had been shouting, arguing, and debating. Coffee cups covered every table. Many people looked like they hadn't slept in days. Secretary General Park Min-ho sat at the front, watching the chaos. His head was pounding, and his eyes were red from exhaustion. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Kim Hannah had brought them news that changed everything. There were aliens out there, and they were dying. "This is madness," shouted the delegate from Russia, standing up and waving his papers. "We're talking about sending every ship we have to a place that's 18 months away. 18 months. And for what? To try to save 40 million aliens we've never even seen?" Other delegates nodded in agreement. The numbers were frightening. Earth had only recently built ships that could travel between stars, and they had never gone farther than a few light years. The journey to the Zephyrian system would be the longest trip humans had ever attempted. Dr. Kim Hannah stood up slowly. She had been sitting in the same chair for hours, waiting for her chance to speak again. Her throat was dry, and her hands were shaking, but she had to make them understand. "Please, listen to me," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I know this seems impossible. I know it sounds crazy, but I've been listening to their signals for weeks now. These aren't just random aliens asking for help." She pressed a button, and the speakers around the hall filled with a strange, beautiful sound. It was the Zephyrian signal, translated into frequencies humans could hear. It sounded like music, but sad music, like a funeral song. "They have families," Hannah continued, her voice getting stronger. "They have children who are scared. They create art and music and stories, just like we do. They're not asking us to give them money or technology. They're begging us to help them live." Ambassador Choi Murray from South Korea leaned forward in her seat. She was one of the smartest diplomats in the UN, and everyone respected her opinion. "Dr. Kim, I understand your feelings. We all do. But let's talk about reality. What you're asking for would take every single spaceship we have, every cargo vessel, every research ship, every military craft. If this mission fails, Earth would be defenseless. We would have nothing left." The hall fell quiet. Everyone knew she was right. Humanity had spent decades building their small fleet of starships. If they sent them all to Zephyria, and something went wrong, Earth would be alone and helpless. "And what if we succeed?" asked the delegate from Brazil. "What if we actually manage to save some of these aliens? Where do we put 40 million refugees? How do we feed them? How do we even talk to them?" More delegates started shouting questions. The cost would be enormous. The risks were incredible. No one even knew if the Zephyrians could survive inhuman. Ships are breathed the same air. Dr. Hannah waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again. "I know the risks. I know how much this will cost, but I also know something else." She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. "If we don't try to help them, we lose something much more important than ships or money." "What?" asked the American representative. "We lose our humanity," Hannah said quietly. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy heard the Zephyrian signal. The Galactic Council has technology that could save them easily. The hegemony could move 40 million people without breaking a sweat. But they all did the same thing. They looked at the numbers, calculated the costs, and decided it wasn't worth it. She paused, letting her words sink in. Right now, somewhere, out there, 40 million people are watching their son die. They sent their cry for help across the galaxy, hoping someone would care enough to answer. Everyone else has already given up on them. Are we going to do the same? The debate continued for 2 more hours, but something had changed. Delegates who had been completely against the mission started asking different questions. Instead of, "Why should we help?" they began asking, "How can we help?" When Secretary General Park finally called for the vote, the hall was completely silent. This was the biggest decision humanity had ever made as a species. The votes came in slowly. Countries voted yes. 89 voted no. 10 couldn't decide and abstained. It was much closer than anyone had expected, but it was enough. Park stood up, his voice shaking slightly. "By the authority of the United Nations, we authorize the Zephyrian rescue mission. Captain Song Taeho will command the operation." Captain Song was Earth's best space commander. He had led missions to Mars, Jupiter, and even Alpha Centauri. But he had never attempted anything like this. As he received his orders, he realized he was being asked to do something that seemed impossible: save an entire alien civilization. But something amazing happened over the next few days. As news of the mission spread around Earth, people started volunteering. Engineers offered to work for free, modifying cargo ships to carry refugees. Pilots signed up to fly dangerous missions. Scientists dropped their research to help design life support systems for aliens they had never seen. The mission that politicians called foolish became humanity's greatest moment of unity. For the first time in history, the entire human race was working together toward a single goal. They were going to try to save strangers, simply because it was the right thing to do. Captain Song Taeho couldn't sleep. For 6 months he had been standing on the bridge of the EU's Harmony, watching numbers that got worse every day. The ship was humanity's largest and most advanced vessel, but it was being pushed far beyond what it was designed to do. The rescue fleet stretched out behind them through space like a long metal snake. 200 ships of every size and type that Earth could spare. Cargo vessels, research ships, military cruisers, and even converted passenger liners. All of them racing through the darkness toward a dying world they had never seen. Commander Young Sora called from her station. Her voice sounded tired and worried. "We need to talk about the fuel situation." Taeho walked over to her console, already knowing what she was going to tell him. The numbers on her screen were painted in angry red warnings. Their fusion engines were working so hard that they were consuming fuel much faster than anyone had planned. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad," Sora replied, rubbing her eyes. "We're burning through our cores like they're made of paper. If we keep pushing the engines this hard, we'll have just enough fuel to slow down when we reach Zephyria." "But coming home?" She shook her head. "We might not make it back to Earth." Taeho stared at the fuel readings. Every ship in the fleet was facing the same problem. They had left Earth knowing the journey would be difficult. They hadn't expected their engines to work this poorly in deep space. The cold and radiation were affecting their systems in ways the engineers hadn't predicted. "We keep going," he said finally. "We'll figure out the return trip later." Down in the ship's lower levels, 10,000 volunteers worked day and night, preparing for a rescue mission unlike anything in human history. Dr. Oh-sung had been given an impossible job: design life support systems for aliens that humans had never seen. According to their transmissions, they're made of some kind of crystal, he explained to his team during their daily meeting. They don't breathe oxygen like we do. They absorb energy directly from light and electrical fields. His engineers looked confused. "So how do we keep them alive on our ships?" "We're installing special lighting systems in the cargo holds," Oh replied, showing them the plans on his tablet. "And we're setting up electrical generators that should provide the kind of energy they need, but honestly, we're just guessing. We won't know if it works until we try it." In another part of the ship, linguist Nam Yuri was having her own problems. The Zephyrians didn't speak with words like humans did. They communicated using musical tones and frequencies that were almost impossible for human ears to understand. "Like they're singing to each other," she explained to her team. "But each song carries complex information. One tone might mean danger, while a slightly different tone means hope. And when they combine tones, the meanings become even more complicated." Her team had been working for months to create translation devices, but progress was slow. had managed to understand the basic meanings of the Zephyrian distress signals, but having actual conversations would be much harder every week. The signals from Zephyria became more desperate. The translations painted a picture of a world in its final days. The Zephyrian sun was sending out massive flares that boiled their oceans and destroyed their cities. Magnetic storms were tearing apart their crystal buildings, and their entire civilization was falling apart. Captain Yuri called during one of her translation sessions. You need to hear this latest message. Taiho came to the communications room and listened as Yuri played the translated signal. The Zephyrian voices sounded scared and confused. They're asking if we're real, Yuri explained. Some of them think we might be hallucinations created by their dying minds. They can't believe that anyone would actually come to help them. Taiho felt his heart break a little. These beings were so desperate that they couldn't even trust their own hope. What can we tell them? Well, we could send them some of our cultural information, music, art, stories, things that would prove we're real and show them who we are. Taiho nodded. Do it. Send them everything we have. The response from Zephyria came faster than expected. When the human fleet's computers received the Zephyrian reply, the communication systems almost overloaded. 40 million voices were singing, together in perfect harmony, creating a song so beautiful and complex that it made several crew members cry. What are they saying? Taiho asked. Yuri listened to the translation with tears in her eyes. They're saying thank you. All of them together. They're singing about hope, about gratitude, about beings from another world who cared enough to try. Song continued for hours, traveling through space faster than the human ships could move. It was a song of gratitude so powerful that it reached other star systems, other civilizations. For the first time, the galaxy was hearing about the strange humans who were attempting an impossible rescue. But the human fleet was still months away from Zephyria. And every day brought news that the alien world was getting closer to complete destruction. The race against time was becoming more desperate with each passing hour. Taiho looked at the star charts showing their position. They were moving as fast as humanly possible, but would it be fast enough? Keep pushing the engines, he ordered. We didn't come this far to give up now. When the human fleet finally reached the Zephyrian system, Captain Song Taeho could barely believe what he was seeing. The alien sun was dying in the most violent way possible, throwing massive streams of fire and radiation into space. The star was so bright and angry that it hurt to look at, even through the ship's protective screens. How is anything still alive down there? Whispered Commander Yang Sora, staring at the main display screen. The planet's euphoria was being hammered by solar storms that would have destroyed Earth in minutes. Huge flares of burning gas whipped across its surface, and the space around it crackled with deadly radiation. But somehow, the planet was still there, protected by energy shields that flickered like dying candles. Look at those cities, said one of the bridge crew. Pointing at the magnified images of the planet's surface, the Zephyrian cities were unlike anything humans had ever seen. They looked like they were made of crystal and glass, rising from the ground like frozen music. Many of them were already broken, shattered by the magnetic storms that came with each solar flare. The few that remained were glowing weakly, their lights dimming as their power systems failed. We need to start the evacuation immediately, Taiho ordered. Send down the first shuttles, but be careful. One wrong move in these solar storms and we'll lose everything. The first human shuttle to land on Zephyria was piloted by Commander Park Jinwoo, one of Earth's best pilots. As he guided his craft through the chaotic atmosphere, dodging electrical storms and radiation bursts, he wondered what the aliens would look like. He didn't have to wait long to find out. When the shuttle doors opened, Park found himself face to face with beings that seemed to be made of living crystal. They were incredibly tall, almost 3 meters high, and their bodies caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. But the most amazing thing about them was the sound they made. They were singing, not with voices like humans, but with their entire bodies. The crystalline structures that made up their forms vibrated at different frequencies, creating music that was both beautiful and alien. But when the first Zephyrians saw the humans, their songs changed to sounds of fear and confusion. It's okay, Park said, even though he knew they couldn't understand him. We're here to help. Dr. Kim Hanna was on the second shuttle to land. She had spent months preparing for this moment, but nothing could have readied her for actually meeting the beings whose signals she had first detected. She stepped onto the alien soil. Her translation device picked up the harmonic conversations happening around her. The Zephyrians were afraid. These strange, soft creatures from another world looked nothing like them. Some of the aliens thought the humans might be enemies, come to take advantage of their dying world. But then, one of the Zephyrian elders approached her. This being was even taller than the others, and its crystal body was marked with patterns that showed great age. When it spoke, somehow its harmonic voice was translated into words Hannah could understand. I am called Resonance who seeks dawn, the elder sang. You are the beings from the distant world called Earth. Yes, Hannah replied, her voice shaking with emotion. We came as fast as we could. The elder's crystal body shifted colors, patterns, of light flowing through its structure. Your kind puzzles us greatly. By all mathematical calculations, helping us brings you no benefit. You risk your ships, your lives, your entire civilization for strangers you have never met. This defies
logic.
Hannah looked around at the dying world, at the Zephyrian children whose crystal bodies were dim with fear, at the broken cities and the angry sun above. You sent out a call for help, she said simply. We heard it. How could we not come? Evacuation began immediately, but it was the most dangerous operation humans had ever attempted. The Zephyrian sun was throwing out solar flares every few hours, and each one sent deadly radiation sweeping across the planet. Human shuttle pilots had to time their flights perfectly, racing between storms to ferry refugees to the waiting ships. Commander Yang Sora coordinated the rescue efforts from orbit, watching as her pilots pushed their craft far beyond safe limits. Shuttle 7, you have a massive flare coming your way in 3 minutes, she radioed. Can you make it to the ship? Negative, came the reply from pilot Lee Minsu. We're loaded with refugees and our engines are overheating. We'll never make it in time. Then find cover and wait it out, Sora ordered, her heart pounding as she watched the deadly solar storm approaching the shuttle. The evacuation became a desperate race against time.
Down.
Every hour, more Zephyrian cities went dark as their power systems failed. The planet's protective shields were weakening, and soon the surface would be completely uninhabitable. But not all the Zephyrians wanted to leave. Many of them had deep cultural connections to their homeworld. They believed that their ancestors' spirits lived in the crystal formations that covered the planet, and abandoning these sacred sites would be worse than death. We cannot leave the Harmony sites, explained one group of Zephyrians. Our songs have been sung here for 1,000,000 years. If we go, that music will be lost forever. Hannah tried to convince them, but she understood their choice. These beings had roots in their world that went deeper than simple survival. In the end, only 60,000 Zephyrians agreed to trust their lives to the strange aliens who had crossed the galaxy to save them. It was a tiny fraction of their total population, but it was 60,000 lives that would continue because humans had chosen to care. Captain Han Junho gripped the controls of his cargo ship as alarms screamed all around him. The New Hope was the last human vessel still in the Zephyrian system, and the dying star was about to explode. His ship was old and slow, packed with the final group of Zephyrian refugees, and barely staying ahead of the expanding wave of destruction. Come on, old girl, he whispered to his ship, pushing the engines harder than they had ever been pushed before. Just a little more. Behind them, the Zephyrian sun collapsed in on itself with unimaginable violence. In seconds, a star that had burned for billions of years crushed down to a ball of matter so dense that a teaspoon of it would weigh as much as a mountain. The explosion that followed lit up half the galaxy, sending shock waves racing through space at the speed of light. But something else happened at that exact moment, something that no one had expected. The 60,000 Zephyrian refugees aboard. The human ships began to sing. It wasn't planned, wasn't organized. As they watched their homeworld die, the crystal beings simply started making music together. Their bodies, made of living crystal, vibrated in harmony with each other. This wasn't just any song. This was a song of gratitude so pure and powerful that it did something incredible. The Zephyrians' crystal biology worked like a natural amplifier for quantum signals, and 60,000 of them sang together. Their combined voices created a broadcast that was stronger than anything the galaxy had ever heard. The song traveled faster than light itself, reaching every corner of civilized space in moments. For the first time in galactic history, every intelligent species heard the same message at exactly the same time. It wasn't a message made of words or mathematics. It was pure emotion, transformed into music that any consciousness could understand. The song told the story of a dying world of hope when all seemed lost, and of strange beings from a distant planet who had risked everything to save strangers. The effect was immediate, shocking. On the homeworld of the hegemony of rationale, thought, billions of logical beings suddenly found themselves making sounds they had never made before. Their perfectly ordered society was disrupted as individuals began creating their own harmonic responses to the Zephyrian song. "This is impossible," declared their high calculator, a being whose mind was designed to process only facts and logic. "We do not respond to emotional stimuli. We do not create unnecessary sounds. Yet I find myself wanting to sing." Across the galaxy, the collective of perfect logic experienced what their scientists would later call computational anomalies. These machine beings had been created to think without feeling, to make decisions based only on data and efficiency. But the Zephyrian song reached something deeper than their programming. Error, reported their central processing unit. Detecting unauthorized emotional subroutines, source unknown. Attempting to purge, purge unsuccessful. Emotional responses remain active. The song reached civilizations that had never known emotion, species that had abandoned compassion long ago in favor of cold efficiency. But somehow, the Zephyrian gratitude touched something that they had forgotten existed. On Earth, Secretary General Park Min-ho was woken by his aide at 3 a.m. "Sir, you need to see this immediately." Park stumbled to his communication center, still half asleep. On the screen was a message that made him fully alert in seconds. It was the first official diplomatic transmission Earth had ever received from the Galactic Council. The message was simple, but revolutionary. "We wish to understand this concept you call compassion." Dr. Kim Hanna stood in the temporary settlement on Earth's moon, watching the Zephyrian refugees adapt to their new home. The crystal beings had learned to speak human languages remarkably quickly, though they still preferred to communicate through their beautiful harmonic songs. The settlement was unlike anything humans had ever built. Special lights provided the energy the Zephyrians needed to survive, and the buildings were designed to amplify their musical communications. Children from both species played together, human laughter mixing with crystalline chimes in ways that made everyone smile. Dr. Hanna, called Resonance Huzixdon, the Zephyrian elder who had become the unofficial leader of the refugees. "I have something I must tell you." Hanna walked over to the tall crystal being, still amazed by the way light danced through its transparent body. "What is it?" "You and your species have given us something more precious than life itself," the elder sang, its harmonic voice creating patterns of meaning that the translation devices could barely capture. "You have shown us that consciousness can choose love over logic, that intelligence does not have to mean coldness." Hannah felt tears in her eyes. "We just did what felt right." "Yes, Resonance," Huzixdon replied. "That is exactly why it was so important." In the months that followed, Earth found itself at the center of galactic attention for the first time in human history. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries now wanted to learn about compassion, empathy, and the strange human concept of helping others without expecting anything in return. The rescue of Zephyria had become legend throughout the galaxy, but its real impact was just beginning. Advanced civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting logical systems began to question whether they had lost something important along the way. On distant worlds, beings who had never experienced emotion began to ask themselves a very human question. What if caring about others wasn't a weakness, but the greatest strength of all? The Zephyrian song continued to echo through space, carrying its message of gratitude and hope to every corner of the galaxy. Everywhere it was heard, Something began to change. The galaxy was learning to feel again.